Happy Wealth Wednesday, Elizabeth. I'm so excited to have you here. You've been a longtime friend since I think it was 2019 when we were in Israel for reality together. And I've just been so inspired and amazed by the different things you've done. Even just looking at your profile, it's head of WeWork Labs, you were doing the Grand Challenge at Amazon. You then have done various different ecosystem development and startups, and even out of reality, ultimately launched a fund, which was called Find Ventures. And now I know you're at HP, which is doing more of this work in the startup ecosystem. So I think you're just such a great testament to what it takes to launch and what it takes to incubate something that is a seed and then germinate it into the world of reality, especially in these really big institutions. So I'm so grateful to know you. I can't wait to dive in.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited. Again, the admiration is so mutual. I just love what you've been doing and building this. And so I just feel really honored to be one of your guests today. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Well, I'd love if you just share quickly a little bit about where you are right now and what you're up to these days. You have a good giveaway in your screen background right now.
Yes. So I live in Seattle. I do think it's one of the best places in the world for innovation and just nature and existence. Just real quick to plug Seattle. We have lots of wonderful, beautiful places to go hiking and kayaking and skiing. But we also have big epicenters of research and innovation here. So, a lot of big brands were created here. Such as REI, Nordstrom, Starbucks, Alaska Airlines, Microsoft, Amazon, the list keeps going on and on. We're cemented with amazing University of Washington, where I part-time teach, and then, Seattle University and some others that are just create this wonderful powerhouse of insight, of curiosity, and natural beauty.
I love it. I'm gonna have to come visit actually. And tell me a little bit about what you're doing now, because actually this is a newer role to me. What you're up to at HP.
Yeah, so at HP, I'm really lucky to work there with some amazing teams. And what we're doing is looking internally at the incubations that we have within our business units. And so how can we view our leaders as equivalent of startup founders and provide them the resources that they need to launch their really big ideas using the HP ecosystem and resources that we have here. And so I get to work with some amazing internal founders and help them think through their strategy, their business strategy, and get them connected to the external ecosystem, the startup ecosystem. So I can't talk too much more about that, but hopefully soon we'll have some more press and cool things to share.
Some things, yeah. And then also you're still doing Find Ventures. You want to share a little bit of the origins of that, because I think it's so beautiful and really the types of founders you're dedicated to supporting.
Yeah, so I've been in the startup ecosystem for 15 plus years, helping people go from their idea stage to launching and scaling. And so I just saw this need, and at reality, it sort of accumulated on hey, I'm always seeing really great folks that come from under-resourced backgrounds, unable to bring their great ideas that I think would be transformative to the world. And they're facing that barrier of capital. They've been mentored. There's a lot of community support, but they're missing that capital piece to be able to put their hypothesis into experimentation, to get some of that data, to really prove out that their startup has viability. And so created Find Ventures as a non-dilutive grants where we can provide to those founders up to $100,000, where they can take their ideas, get some real traction, get connected to the ecosystem, and then really be able to grow their companies. So a lot of under-resourced founders don't have those friends, family, or fools, what they call that initial funding to seed their company. So we want to be that early seed to allow for these companies to come forth. And what we're seeing, in PitchBook and other data sources have put out funding, less than 2% goes to, all female teams. We're seeing this just statistics all over not changing, even though this big conscious awareness of the need of and the power of diversity within teams. The ecosystem is not adapting capital in the ways that, that in my mind that we should. So we allow all great ideas to be able to flourish. So Find Ventures is a nonprofit where we take in donations We provide capital to founders. Founders then sign a pledge that if they ever make it big, and they define that they then pay it forward to the next founder, so that one day we hope will be an evergreen fund that is supported by the founders for founders. But right now we have some wonderful philanthropists that make the donations possible for us.
Wow, so cool. I would love to jump in a bit later on like how you evaluate those projects, if there's specific geography or different criteria. But we do have a set of kind of standard things we ask. And I really love these questions because I feel like it opens up like a set of realism to like what it's like women investing in this like world across time, money, and capital. And I think you're doing a lot of cool things across all of those. So the first question is just if you remember what your first ever investment was. It could have been like in the public markets and venture, and just like what got you started.
I think for me, my first investment, when we're looking at all those different dimensions, right, time, etc., was really to dive into the community. How do I give back to my community? And at that time, I was in the biotech space. So how can I participate? And we had a group in Seattle called Women in Bio, and I think that they're now a national organization. So I joined that group and said, how can I support this group by either providing content, volunteer my time and expertise, or providing other types of resources. And so for me, that was really it. And then I've been volunteering and helping different organizations grow. So to me, board services is critical to supporting organizations that I support, that I just feel like are providing valuable services to our community and support. So I think that really has been the key for me, is just, yes, you work 40 hours a week, but you should also donate at least 5 hours plus a week to amazing community organizations to help them grow. Early on in your career, I understand, as you get older, you have other responsibilities. And so, you may not be able to give that much time, but whatever time you can do, I do believe in carving out and giving back to organizations that fulfill a mission that's deeply needed for our society. The other, things that I've done personally, as far as, how have I invested? I've really looked at property. Seattle has always been a fast growing city. And so there's always, ability to sort of secure yourself for your own wealth and by, owning your own property. And so for me, that was always, a big milestone. In my 20s was able to save up enough money, get a down payment, being able to have my first co-op condo, then, being able to then take that into a single family home, has been really important for me as well. So being able to have that wealth generation, opportunity for myself has been key.
Those are such great examples. And maybe just a quick plug, but like, what are the boards that you donate your time to?
Awesome. Yeah. So NPR is KUOW in Seattle. I'm a board emeritus now. I was serving time, and so now I still give time back to that organization. An organization called PSA, and they are an organization that helps the indigenous population of Rwanda. So it's founded by a doctor here in Seattle that works with a healthcare provider in Rwanda and providing capacity support for that. World Affairs Council of Seattle, so bring in that global perspective to the Seattle citizens, so that we always remember that we're not just in this like wonderful ecosystem bubble, but what's going around in the world, and how do we make sure that we have that global competency, and then find ventures, right? So that's where I spend a lot of my time now, is hyper focused in on that profit.
I love this. And how did you get from biotech into startup incubation?
Yeah, so I was actually part of one of the very first accelerators in the world called Accelerator Corp, and they were a biotech company. So I was working at a big biotech company called Amgen, and then I went over to a really big nonprofit research center called Fred Hutch Cancer Research Center, and a position to open in this small biotech company that was created by one of the founders of a drug called Enbrel that was produced out of Amgen. And one of those founders started his own company. And so I knew really wonderful things about those founders. And so I applied to a position as a research associate and part of a 5-6 person team that was part of a bigger accelerator, and they had multiple startups that were working out of it. And so we were part of the first batch. Love that whole process of startups working next to startups. What are the shared services? How can we help each other? Everyone had this big, audacious goals that they were trying to do of curing different diseases, etc. And so I just fell in love with this idea that, hey, small startups can emulate big companies, and we can, use resources, central resources, just like big companies. But we don't need to actually be part of the same company. And so I just love that model. And then as our company grew, we ended up having extra capacity of space. And so actually started my own incubation services out of that company, started incubating other cool companies like Adaptive, which I IPO'd a couple of years ago and doing really cool stuff. And then the University of Washington wanted to start one of these as well. And so joined that team to launch their bigger initiatives, which we then turned into Commotion Labs at the University of Washington, incubating not just biotech. University of Washington is a global leader in biotech research and life science research, and so that was that was the center of excellence there. But then started branching out into AI, blockchain, and then we had a VR AR laboratory incubator going as well with other startups in Seattle. And so it's just been able to sort of, as the industry grows and as all these new technologies come to be, how do we incorporate them in and bring in those innovators and founders? And so that's kind of how sort of as the industry was growing in all these new disciplines, it just brought in those disciplines into my program. And so then therefore is able to then learn and deep dive on those from the people that were creating it.
That's phenomenal. What a cool story. I think it's always nice to see like the journey. One small decision can turn into this, big career of really specializing in the space. And we talked about this a little bit, like the role you play in the wealth space and why it's important. And I think I'd love to talk about, the fund, like going back to, how do you select startups that you guys are going to support? Is there a geographic focus? And, why is that important? Like how you set that criteria and who you ultimately end up backing?
Yeah, so for our first launch earlier in 2022, we partnered with the Washington State Department of Commerce. They paid for some internal operations. They did not give any direct funding to the startups. And so with that collaboration partnership, we focused in on Washington State startups that were all in high-tech areas and that came from underrepresented backgrounds, Black, LGBTQ, women, BIPOC in general, and even those that are outside of the city limits as well. And so that we then had a good geography mix as well as a good industry mix. And so we had people part of that judging criteria from the State Department, as well as just our advisors on our committee, being able that then our advisors come from the startup ecosystem and have sort of the know-how and the expertise of what it takes for founders to go from idea to scale up, and so that they could also be able to critique the ideas that people were presenting. And honestly, it was hard. I would have loved to take 4x the amount that we did. So I just think that there is a huge need. There is no pipeline problem. It's just a problem of deploying the capital to them. And so that decision on who at the end of the day was extremely hard. And I wish that we could have actually had much more funding to be able to provide these startups.
Absolutely. And so when you've done this at so many different institutions, for-profit, nonprofit, what do you think has been the most exciting thing that you've learned that you would want others to know when they're thinking about going from idea to scale up, and what ultimately ends up attracting the resources and the capital and the service to the world that actually clicks, and has a success and is worth the risk?
Yeah. I really think that it's like the why. Why does that company exist? Why does it need to exist? Is it something that just is a convenience? Probably not, right? But does it solve a real humanitarian need? And is there, and if it does, there's usually a market and customers and funding, paying customers that want to actually pay for a solution to solve that, right? And so I think first is foremost is that it has to be a worthwhile problem solving, and that, and then secondly, are you emotionally invested in it for a 10-year process? Is this a problem you wake up every day thinking about and just wanting to figure out? Your solution will pivot as new technologies come in, as new information comes in, as you're learning. So you can't fall in love with the solution. And I've seen people fall in love with the solution and try to keep finding markets for it. And that doesn't really work very well. So it's really falling in love with the problem, being hyper focused on that problem and those customers that are getting affected, or those users that are getting affected by that problem, and really falling in love with that and wanting to solve that and finding solutions. And then, and then also we live in a world where innovation and, in business is never just a one-on-one transaction. It is now multiple players being strategically aligned to really solve and to help bring these solutions to reality. And so I think also, who are the partners you want to go with? Who are all the stakeholders, and understanding that entire stakeholder ecosystem, and who can you bring in early on to help validate your solution, help validate, your business model, and also who's the right talent that you should bring in too. Because sometimes there's opportunities for partnership on that way as well. And so I think, to me, it's just problem, and then making sure that you have the stakeholders really engaged would be my first advice for any founder.
Great advice. Thank you for sharing that. And is there now, from all this experience, like a person or a company that's really inspiring you in this space right now, and why?
There's so many. So it's really, really hard for me to say. Findventures.org has a list of 10 amazing startups on that I love. I am, I think that to point it out to just one or two is really hard for me. So I just definitely say, check out findventures.org. We have amazing startups there. I believe in all of them and doing some cool stuff. So check it out.
Okay, we'll definitely link that in the transcript for everyone to see. And what advice would you give to somebody getting started? If you think back to you in this biotech company, like in the earliest parts of your career, trying to set up that, financial wealth and well-being for yourself, what advice would you give?
Go to every networking event you can and go talk to two people. Don't go in thinking you have to get to know the entire room. Don't get to know everything else. Just go in, be very curious, and meet two people. And when you have those interactions, try to see if you can glean something about them that you didn't know before. And then as you keep doing that over and over and go to new networking events, eventually you'll start having a really healthy network and figuring out what are the right ways to engage with that network. Is it through LinkedIn? Is it through email correspondence? Is it through, adding them to a newsletter that you may have? But keeping in contact with people and getting to know people will open up new opportunities for you that you never knew. People hold opportunities, not companies, not abstract things. It's people. And so when you create those deep relationships with people, great things can happen. And so my biggest advice for anyone is just go out, volunteer time if you're able, and or not, and just go and network and set your limits, of your goals manageable, like 2, maybe even 1 at first, just to get up that courage. You met 2, okay, you can leave, if you get some anxiety around big events. But set up those things so that you can keep going and building this community, because especially in the innovation community, people want to share what they're doing. They get really excited. They want to talk to you. They want to, show you their vision, right? And so, listen and be curious. And I think that it'll be fun to see what happens from there.
Wow, I love that answer. I think that's one of the most tangible and one of my favorite answers I've ever got to that question, because it's so true. And that quote, people hold opportunities, not abstract companies and conceptual ideas. It's like, it's all so human. And like, how do we connect to that humanity? Wow, I'm like quoting that for sure. And like, that's a clip for the books. And I know you shared a little bit of this info, but how can we keep in touch with Find Ventures and you personally on your journey?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is kind of the easiest for me. I also post sometimes on Twitter. But yeah, and then findventures.org, we have a newsletter that we send out monthly. So definitely sign up for that. You can hear about what we're doing and what we're thinking about, what we'd like to hope, and what's some great things that our startups are doing. So those are the easiest ones off the top of my head. And then, we'll never know. I'm sure there's other ways that we can connect later.
I love that. Thanks so much, Elizabeth, for joining today, for sharing all this amazing insight and just all the work that you're doing in this space. So
thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate our time today. Thank you.